Of course, like there's such a massive amount of emotional, effort it takes to look at like these images and of suffering, to engage with suffering, to see a dog with a broken leg or a cow with a maggot wound, or to look at dispassionately at, at investigation images, of animals being slaughtered and killed and burnt and beaten and stoned. And then to have to pull yourself up and say, okay, I've got to respond to this, in a professional, effective, impactful manner.
Domination isn't limited to relationships between humans. It also extends to non-human animals and has reached an unprecedented scale in history due to their systematic commoditization and exploitation by the so-called free market capitalism. Among the organizations fighting for animal welfare is India's FIAPO, whose executive director Varda Mehrotra joins us today for this episode.
Hello, Varda. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode dedicated to non-human animal rights and rescue as well. It is your job and your passion probably. First of all, can you tell us what was your first pet?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really good to be here. It's absolutely much more than a job. It's a passion, and it's been a passion for a very, very long time. I had the privilege of living with a dog, my pet. I think when I was about 16 years old, 15 or 16 years old, I'd been sort of wanting to, I always loved animals, and I've been pestering my parents for many, many, many years that, let's get an animal in the house. And so finally, I think it was the end of some exams that my dad finally gave in and said, okay, fine, you did well, or some such thing, or at least that's what I remember of it. And that's how we got the first wonderful dog in my life.
All right. How long did you keep it? And did you like move around with it a lot? Did you I don't know, take it with you abroad, or because you lived abroad, right?
Yes. Yeah, I lived in Scotland for 9 years, and I did not take. It wouldn't have been fair on. I don't feel it's fair on the animals to move them around. So which is why all the time I lived in Scotland, actually, I chose to not, adopt any animal, because I wasn't sure. Even though I ended up staying there for 9 years, but I wasn't sure, where I'd be, what I'd be doing. So I think, that's certainly something that's even for me now, and I think it's really important. If we take animals, if we open our homes and hearts to animals, and we're able to support animals in distress, then I think it's really important to make sure that we have the ability to provide stable space for them, including, good vets around, and, all of those things. So I wasn't able to, so yeah, I'm now sort of in one place, and I haven't for the last, I think, another 9-10 years. I've been living where I do just now, and it's been really good to have animals back in my life, because I think it just deepens, it just deepens the animal activism work that we do. I think having a connection with an animal really deepens deepens it at a very experiential level, what we're really, what we're really fighting for.
Absolutely. So when did you realize that you really wanted to dedicate a big part of your life to animals? Was it before you got that first pet, or during or after?
I mean, my father worked with the government. He was a senior bureaucrat and he headed the forest, sort of department in a state in India. And so I spent a lot of time growing up with with a lot of exposure to the natural world, spending endless holidays and weekends, in forests and, visiting different forests. And I think at a very young age, completely thanks to my upbringing, my parents, the values that they inculcated, I absolutely fell in love with the natural world, and so I think it was a very natural progression. I came from a meat-eating family, but my father was a vegetarian, and I think that really gave me the support at an early age to sort of think about my personal choices. So I was a vegetarian as young as like 3-4 years old, and then sort of slowly, continued to, when I remember endless debates with family members about being that you should be vegetarian and don't eat meat and all of those things, even when I was something like just a teenager. So I don't think it was connected to I think the desire to have a dog live with us at that point in time, or have an animal live with us at that point in time, was more a result of my inclination towards my whole orientation towards the natural world and animals, rather than the other way around. And it was a very, after I finished my master's, it was a very clear choice for me to work in the development sector. I did not want to work in the private for-profit sector. And, it just flowed from there. It was always sort of a very natural progression. Yes, this is what I want to do. This is what, so that's really where it evolved over time versus one Eureka movement.
Right. And what did you study, by the way? What was your master's in?
So that was another lifetime. I studied cognitive science in my master's, and my background is actually information technology and computer sciences, and I absolutely loved it. And I was so close to actually pursuing a career in that, instead of, but I was like I said, it's just been incredible luck. I had a great opportunity come along my way to work in the development sector, so I took that. But like I said, that was another lifetime ago.
Yeah, but I'm sure you're still a little bit of a geek, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when did you start rescuing animals? When did you say, like, okay, now I need to go like to the next level, because you were vegetarian already, like pets, or I should say non-human animals, because pets is a little bit, it sounds a little bit pejorative, maybe negative.
It is.
Right.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like an object, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Companion animal.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many elements in language which actually reinforce this sort of domination. So when did you start really rescuing animals? When did you decide to move to the next level?
So my journey for activism has been very different, actually, compared to most animal activists in India. Because I really was exposed to activism when I was in Scotland, instead of India. And because in Scotland there aren't so many street animals that have to be rescued, my initiation, so to speak, in the movement was not through the path of rescue, but through the path of grassroots activism. I was first an animal rights activist before starting to do animal rescue work, and I only did that when I came back to India, nearly a decade ago now, to, because I really wanted to do the work here. I went through the whole grassroots activism, movement building, alliances, network, that sort of path. And that happened, like I said, in Scotland, that happened, as a volunteer. I was always sort of looking for opportunities. I was already working in the space of supporting social enterprises, international development. I was volunteering for a whole load of things. I was involved with the local social justice center. I was really sort of at that time. I think this was about 2005, 6. I was really involved in multiple movements. And then the fact that the city I was living in, Edinburgh, had practically no animal rights activity at that point in time, really got, a few of us got together and said, okay, we're going to start something. And, we set up a local grassroots group, and then ended up actually supporting other activists in other cities, also setting up grassroots group and, really sort of mobilizing. And that's really also where I learned the tools of the trade, networking, alliances, mobilization, movement building, all of those things. The animal rescue work actually happened much later when I came back to India, and then there was a need, and I think my activism has always been in some ways in response to a need. There was a need in Scotland to do the grassroots work, so that was what was the shape it took. And then, of course, now I'm in India and I see animals around me. And apart from the work that I do through FIAPO, which is, obviously not to do with direct animal service, but more to do with policy, movement building, and so on. But, you live and then you see, you see a dog outside your house or on the street, or you see a cow abandoned somewhere and, struggling and, limping and so on. So, one tends to respond, because I think that's a natural empathetic response. So that's how I'm now more involved in rescues than I was earlier.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit what is, because you have this like international perspective, I guess, because you've lived abroad. What is people's relationship to animals in India and maybe also in Scotland, and what is different? What have you noticed really?
Yeah, I think in India there is a tolerance of an acceptance of animals that I absolutely love. Like I love it, and I know it's sort of like really frustrating at times, and that you're walking on the street, and and then you see dogs and you see cows, and you see all these animals that are and I think the way that that we relate to these animals in India is certainly problematic in some ways. That there's a dog or a cat or a cow that has maggots or is sick or is hungry, and people don't care. People are just ignoring it. And I think that's fundamentally that's a really poor response. Something has broken somewhere. That when we see another being in suffering and we are not responding, I think that's a cause of concern. But at the same time, there is also a lot of tolerance. I mean, people are people are willing to coexist, and that level of coexistence does not really exist in Scotland. I mean, there's a very, or at least in the British movement, there's a very clear relationship between humans and animals, and and it's animals have very clear roles. I mean, either you're a pet or food or entertainment. I mean, there's whereas in India it's more fluid. It's there's this when you talk to somebody in India, there is an acknowledgement somewhere that animals that they feel pain, that they suffer, that that yes, one must be kind to animals. And of course, kindness to animals has is you only get so far with kindness to animals when you think about rights of animals and intrinsic value of animals, because that's so much more than just being kind to animals. But at the same time, in India, there is that acknowledgement, whereas in the British movement, I didn't experience that. Of course, the legal system, the welfare laws, and so on were better enforced in Scotland than in the UK, and so I think from that point of view, maybe the more so maybe some of the cruelty that we see in India, especially out on the streets, is is not that apparent. But but I think on the whole, India is certainly more accepting of her animals.
Yeah, excellent point. It's also what I've noticed, because I've lived in the West as well, and yeah, absolutely. In the West, there is this ideology where you need to categorize things, and this extraordinary ability of seeing an animal sometimes as a pet or food, and totally disconnecting from the fact that it is a creature that is sensitive, that feels happiness, pain, and so on. Whereas, yeah, outside the West, what I've seen is that people, care more and give animals maybe more of this this character of a living creature.
Mm-hmm.
And what about vegetarianism in India? probably it's very widespread, right?
It is. I think vegetarianism is a complex issue in India. I think because on the one hand we do have a significant population that is vegetarian, and there is more acceptance of vegetarian. Vegetarian food is Indian food is it's naturally vegetarian, so there's no difficulty in terms of alternatives. I mean, I remember traveling in Europe or in the UK, sometimes there would be, especially, 10, 15 years ago, there was a struggle to be able to find, vegan food, whereas in India, all those challenges don't exist because people are generally more accepting of vegetarianism as a whole. And there are more, there are obviously significantly more vegetarians here. The difficulty with vegetarianism in India is that it comes from the whole religious angle. It comes from religious motivations, and sometimes animals can just be used as pawns. And it's not, we are not then talking about abstaining from exploiting animals, but we are merely just saying, well, we shouldn't do this because our motive is either is to or is oppression or domination or the pursuit of specific ideologies, religious ideologies. So I think when that happens, animals end up getting caught in a fight or in a discussion or in a debate or in a narrative where they are just being used as pawns, and then that completely shortchanges the issue as a whole, and I think the animal movement certainly also needs to step up to, to sort of clarify some of those problems that come up. So I think vegetarianism is certainly significant in India, but I think it also has those other connotations which one needs to be, we need to see it in the context of the, economic, social, political, cultural story of India.
So you said in one of your organizations, FIAPO's reports, that animal consumption was increasing in India. Where does this come from? Is it the westernization of India somehow, or is it something else? Maybe higher purchasing power?
Mm-hmm. So I think the higher purchasing power certainly makes people more aspirational, and aspirationally India looks, especially the youth, look at the US and looks at the West for following, that's what is aspirational. So McDonald's and, so there's this sort of whole, the increase of meat, the increase of dairy products, that is what is aspirational. So the extra buying power ends up going into, into buying more animal products. And that's why we are seeing in India, and we have been for so long, we've been seeing more and more fast food being available. We are seeing a phenomenal increase in the amount of meat and dairy that is being consumed, in India. Which is because of both the increasing buying power and also because, what people are wanting to do with the buying power is being set by what is happening in the West.
Yeah, I think that's very sad because I really don't see the West as a good example. Absolutely not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
Right.
we're importing things back. Like, it's the ideas of ahimsa, the ideas of, this whole, yoga and, all this sort of like, all these things, we are actually importing them back from the West, so it's so many. And I hope that maybe the compassion to animals and the whole idea of ethical lifestyle, maybe somewhere we will, we might, I don't know, we might import it back from the US, but certainly we are in India, that's not something that's, on the main stage.
And what about your organization? Can you tell us when it was created and what was the need that it was answering?
So, we were formally founded in 2010, but our story goes back to actually 2007. The Asia for Animals conference took place in Chennai in India. And on the last day of this conference, a group of Indian activists met at a side event to discuss the need for an Indian national federation that could link organizations and deliver national impact. So it's always been an organization that was for the movement and by the movement, and that continues to be our greatest strength today. Our networking, our ability to bring people together, continues to be what drives the organization's engine forward. So that's really how we set up.
It's some sort of umbrella organization, right?
So we represent 174 animal NGOs just now in the country, and about another 1,000 activists. And as an example of our networking, I think in 2013, one of the major challenges that we faced was that specifically for farmed animals, there was very little and limited activism and advocacy in India. Most of the activism and advocacy focused on companion animals, on rescue, spay neuter work, rehabilitation. So when we saw farmed animals are of course the majority in terms of scale, it's a huge number of animals that are impacted. So when we were faced with this problem, we started to set up what is now become India's largest grassroots farmed animal advocacy network. It was a very humble beginning. We started with 6 activists in 6 cities, and now it's grown to, I think, about 1,000 activists in 90 cities. And it's been absolutely phenomenal, the way that the whole farmed animal movement has grown and taken its own, shape and journey. And yeah, that's been really exciting. And I think our networking and movement building efforts are something that have always been very crucial, for as an umbrella organization, as the big tent in India.
How do you recruit activists and how do you train them?
So in the early days, we used to sort of actively reach out. We would sort of talk to people. When we first started, we used to actually spend a lot of time on the ground. I mean, I personally just lived out of a suitcase, just traveling across the country, meeting lots of different member organizations, conducting lots of workshops, talking to people about the need for coming together, about talking about what we are, what we're all about. And over time, and that's a model that we continue to follow. I mean, before COVID, our campaigners we would spend a lot of time out in the field, out on the ground, meeting people, meeting activists, meeting organizations, to talk to them about the need of becoming more effective, about being more trained, about being more networked, about working together. And of course, now as time has gone by, we receive a lot of requests now from people to volunteer with us, to work with us. So we get, now it's a case of, really trying to keep up with all the requests that we get. So it goes both ways. We reach out often, we are constantly reaching out to people and, sharing about, what we do. And we also receive a large volume of people who want to get active and want to work in partnership, for different campaigns that we run. And in terms of training, we do the more classic training. So we do a lot of workshops, and now lots of them are online, the webinars. We provide a lot of resources. We do a lot of networking, so we encourage a lot of peer learning. We will help activists connect up with people in their cities and people from other cities, so that there is this connection that is formed across the country. And then we also do a lot of mentorship and what we call light touch support. So our campaigners, we have a team of 4 people whose role is really just to support grassroots activists and member organizations. So they're constantly in touch with our network, and anybody, if you're a part of our network and if you need help with something, you can just call your local sort of zonal coordinator, north, south, east, west, and get support and stay in touch. And that sort of support is super crucial for local organizations and activists, because often, often we know what we have to do, but we just need encouragement, we just need support, we just need somebody to talk to, and I think that's something that we are quite aware about. We have been for, that's been an important part of the support that we provide. And I think that's helped our network grow so phenomenally.
Yeah, animal activism, like some other sorts of activism, they do take a toll, right, on you, because you do get to see some very horrible stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, several years ago, I initiated this conversation. I sort of, put this message out in our network saying that, this was sort of like partly a personal project and partly an organization. Because I was really interested to hear, because we didn't talk about burnout in more openly in the movement. So I put a message out saying, people who have faced these issues, reach out and, share your stories. And I was overwhelmed. I was so shocked by the amount and I mean, sadly so, by just the sheer number of people who wrote to me saying that, yeah, this happened to me and that happened to me and I face this problem. And that really sort of got this conversation going within me that, we really need to be doing something to respond to this issue. And we are, we haven't done as much as we would have liked, but we were, what we do regularly is that in all our trainings, in all the workshops and events that we do, we always include talking, training on dealing with burnout, training on dealing with all of these issues of, and not just sort of, of course, like there's such a massive amount of emotional, effort it takes to look at like these images and of suffering, to engage with suffering, to see a dog with a broken leg or a cow with a maggot wound, or to look at dispassionately at, at investigation images, of animals being slaughtered and killed and burnt and beaten and stoned, and then to have to pull yourself up and say, okay, I've got to respond to this, in a professional, effective, impactful manner. So I think that's one part of it, and I think then also, of course, the whole tension of working with other people. I mean, we are an animal rights welfare movement, but ultimately our work is with people, and that can have its own tensions, its own conflicts, its own burdens. So I think it's like so important, and one of the things that I always advocate for, that our movement is based on non-violence, and non-violence is not just towards animals, but also towards each other, also towards ourselves in self-empathy, and I think that's really important. And we try and ensure that we are continuously training our activists, continuously talking about these things with our network, so that they're better equipped to be able to deal with this.
I know I've read in one of the reports that you do some undercover investigations in order to maybe get to sue maybe some illegal slaughterhouses or farms where animals are mistreated. So actually you have to at the same time remain very objective, like as in the law, and to figure out what are the elements that can help you get the case to the justice system, and at the same time you're dealing with living creatures which are clearly suffering, right?
Absolutely. And I think when one is out and looking at these things, I think you've got to sort of, and I think practically pretty much everybody, in the movement of being in the slaughterhouse or rescuing an animal that is injured, I think one ends up sort of blocking some of those painful emotions that come up of the, because we're all called to this work because we can empathize, I mean, as a fundamental human experience, we can empathize with the pain and the suffering of animals. We can feel that tragedy, and when we are confronted with it and when we have to do something about it, I think it's a natural response to sort of say, okay, I'm going to deal with these feelings later, these feelings of distress that are coming up in me as an individual because of seeing this, sick and dying animal and this animal in distress. But I think that later must come. It's important that we don't just sort of put it in a Pandora's box and never open the box. We've got to sort of like do the work of making sure that we're dealing with those things. Otherwise, otherwise it leads to things like burnout, and burnout does not help us or our fellow activists or the animals. So I think it's really important to regularly stay on top of that.
Yeah, excellent point. Absolutely. An activist who is incapacitated is not a good activist, because they can't do anything. So yeah, it's very important that people take care of themselves. But it's so emotional, and people are so passionate about it that they can get carried away. So yeah, it's important that there are organizations like yours that actively make sure that everyone, or as much as you can, everyone is okay in dealing with all these emotions. Do you have psychologists or therapists who can help you in this regard?
We have for our team, we have a psychotherapist who we are in touch with, and we offer sort of so the organization would cover the costs of some of the sessions. The first session with if a staff member is feeling particularly stressed and a staff member requires that support, then we would, that we have a psychotherapist who we sort of recommend that, there is this work done. And in addition, we do have quite open conversations about this. And if there are, we have also had people in the past who have come in, external consultants who are able to come in and support our staff in being able to navigate their feelings. So we would do workshops, we would do, sort of like just for our campaigners to make sure that they're able to, go through these things. I want to touch on one of the things that you just said, which is really interesting, that it's so difficult, I think, on this issue of burnout, because we are so passionate about the work that we do. It is so difficult, I think, we are accountable ultimately for our own mental, emotional, physical health. It's not somebody else who's accountable. But then because we are so passionate, we end up sacrificing our own boundaries and our own needs, because, we are so we are so driven by what we want to do. And I think everybody I think most people in the animal movement are, super passionate about the cause. And that's a really difficult struggle, I think it's really difficult to be able to do that. I think it's important to acknowledge it's a really difficult struggle, I think self-discipline is really, I think it's much easier if somebody else enforces the boundary and says, oh, you've got to start work at this time and stop work. And, and I'm not saying it in the context of work, but, it's so much, it's really hard to be able to do it on your own. And I think that tension, I think that conflict between being passionate, but also being able to rein it in and saying that, okay, I may be very passionate, but I only have this much energy, and then to be able to balance it out. I think that's, it's a really difficult job to be able to do that. And, I think it's important to be alive to that tension that exists in all of us.
Yeah, I'm sure it's part of any activist's career, if I may say, to go through burnout, at least one, or depression, and hopefully to learn lessons from it. But still, to have external support, that's absolutely necessary indeed. Yeah.
In the next part,
we've been sort of working on a campaign to end the use of animals in circuses. And we recently went to court, I think last year. We went to court on that, especially after COVID. There were a lot of stories doing the rounds about circus owners not feeding their animals and taking care of their animals. So we filed an urgent application in court to try and get those animals out. And the great news is that now, when we started this campaign, I think we started it about 4 or 5 years ago, and there was about 30 to 40 circuses using animals that time, and now there are only 6 as a result of our sustained action over the years.